A lot less now than I used to. Oh, yeah. It used to be a
That's
case
fun.
of, yeah, it used to be a case of literally like carrying mats around. I mean, I am actually almost a little bit lazy around the show. And I feel bad, but I mean, I did about 8 years of it. So for Nout, but yeah, there's so much to do, but we've got a good team now. So
Yeah, no, you definitely do. I do remember when I saw you at the event in Ebervale, the Absolute Grand Prix, that you were basically just kind of milling around with your camera in your hands and kind
yeah,
of watch a bit, wander around, watch a bit. So
yeah,
that's a nice position to be in.
yeah.
Well, should we just jump into it?
Yeah, let's go.
Polaris Squads, semi-final, Europe versus Asia just happened. Just give me your first thoughts, first reactions on the event. It was just a couple of days away. How do you feel?
Very, very happy with the event. It was really good matches. We had a discussion last week about the rules, and I was pretty confident that our rules were gonna create some really good matches, and they did. So that was a win. Superfight was good. Ended in a submission, which I think is Owen's first sub on the show. I think.
I think you're right.
Yeah, and overall event was really good. London crowd was amazing. You know, loads of noise. The prelims were amazing because we had a lot of not grudge matches, but a lot of matches that felt fairly significant between, like, I don't know, people in London or people that had competed once or twice against each other or on the show. Just overall was a really good show. Yeah.
It was. I watched the replay the day after, and I've got to say it was really entertaining. Obviously, I'm not just saying this because we're friends. I've always thought this way, but I'm a big fan of the squads format in general, and I like how squads is very unpredictable because you really don't know what's going to happen until it all starts happening. Like you said, that the matches, the sort of the blind reveal of who's going to compete next is always exciting and entertaining. There was some great finishes. There were some amazing highlight reel moments, and there were some really standout performances. I've got a couple of guys off the top of my head who I particularly enjoyed watching, but
Mm-hmm.
who stands out for you? Who are the kind of the MVPs from both teams?
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at the notes that you made, and I kind of agree with you there. Gabriel Souza came out in the second half and started off a bit of a crazy run, and then Kenta, who was already kind of everyone was talking about him after CJI, and it feels like that conversation is continuing now after Polaris because he was so good.
Yeah, he's got some great momentum. You're absolutely right about Gabriel Souza, though. It's interesting, isn't it, that it's not always the sort of the champion level guys who come in and have the best performances. It's those guys who are the most hungry. And I feel like that Gabriel, of course, we know he's amazing. He's hit the podium at ADCC. He's a fantastic competitor. But he came out and he has that amazing combination of obviously world class level jiu-jitsu, but he's a showman as well, and he was one
Yeah,
of the guys I feel getting the crowd whipped up so much, not just through his jujitsu, but also through his general personality and just the energy that he brings, right?
yeah. You could really see the kind of squads vibe coming out in the second half because Asia and Oceania were ahead, and they must have obviously gone backstage and had a kind of team talk, and they came out psyched up for the second half, and then they all started relaxing. They were making a lot more noise, and then when Souza tapped Hedge, they just went bananas, and that was the beginning of like a run of just amazing matches. Um, I've got the memory of a goldfish, so I've got the BJJ Heroes rundown up here, but I remember like because as one of the directors of the show, I feel a kind of like constant tension throughout the whole show. And as we were saying before, we've got the most amazing team working on the show now, like from the directors all the way down to everybody that's been helping. It's usually the same crew almost every show. So luckily, I can basically sit and watch the show. But I do kind of consider that to be an important job because I'm like, I can feel what the audience is feeling. I can see what it's like from a spectator point of view. I can talk to people, just watch the matches, and kind of have a overarching like view of the whole thing. And so I feel tension when, if it's not like non-stop action, I'm almost like having a heart attack, because I want the audience to be really enthralled from beginning to end. But I realize that is completely an unrealistic expectation. So, but the first few matches were decision. So Lucas Canard with like a unpassable guard, basically. I think he got injured in the first one, which was unfortunate. He definitely wasn't quite at his peak, for the preceding matches. But there was a few decisions in a row, and I could feel like a little bit of a murmur in the crowd. And I was, after we'd spoken so much about how good the rules were and everything, they weren't boring matches, but I was just feeling that responsibility to deliver, something super exciting. And then what happened then? Fat Ninja came out with the first submission, and then basically from then on, that was like halfway through the first half, it was really good.
Yeah, I think that kind of broke the ice a little bit, and then it just all started flowing from that point on, didn't it?
Yeah, and then just a little aside about Kenta. So obviously, from a scramble point of view, it's nice to have athletes, in country, for example. Like we sponsor athletes in different parts of the world. And when they come from Polaris, it's a good opportunity to take some photos and do some, promo. So I brought some samples up, and I asked Gianluca, who we sponsor, to model for us. He was like, yeah, no worries. He's very like calm, laid back guy. So we did that on Friday. And then on Saturday, we kind of ran out of time. And then on Saturday, I said to Kenta, would you mind coming a little bit early to the venue and we can do some photo shoots? And he was like, no, I don't want to do that. in a very nice way. He was like, I just want to turn up and compete. He was like, after the show, I can do whatever you want. But so I realized then how like dialed in he was, and you could see it at the side of the mat. He was completely stoic, And then the second he started competing, he was an absolute savage. It was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, he was definitely one of my highlights of the event. I think the thing about Kenta as well, he's so much like Gabriel Souza and Kenta. They're so well suited to the squads format, because those guys are pretty fearless, and it doesn't matter if they're going to go up against a lightweight or a heavyweight. They'll bring that same energy. They'll go head first at the guy, and obviously we saw it with Gabriel. He was chasing after everybody, and the same with Kenta. And I just, he had his moments of adversity too, because that match with Charles, and that was an incredible moment that Kenta got his back, and then Charles spun to defend, and Kenta's head clattered, and it looked like he went head first just off the mat onto the hardwood floor. Is that right?
It was pretty bad, especially after we'd had that conversation about ADCC matches going off the mat. And I had like a slightly different perspective, because it's a mixture of, the rules that you set, but it's also the way that the athletes behave, and it's like snap decisions made by officials in the heat of the moment. It's not an easy thing to control completely. I mean, in hindsight, with Kenta hanging upside down off Charles's back and the wooden floor below him, there should have been a kind of clear indication not to move and not to do anything. And then I think Charles was just in autopilot, and he just kind of span and dropped him, but he clonked his head, and we were all just like, oh no. But, Kenta's tough, so.
Oh, he powered through it. That was incredible, yeah. So just let's quickly recap the sort of the Polaris rules for people who aren't familiar, because it's two 45-minute halves. And basically those 45 minutes, you have matches, and the teams will call out their guys. And every match has a winner, whether it's by submission or decision, and winner stays on. Is there a maximum amount of time that a guy can stay on the mat for?
No.
So he can basically stay on it as long as he keeps winning?
Yeah, so we thought about that a lot. And either he's going to get tired and eventually get subbed, or just, ride out a decision to kind of save his dignity, I guess. If he knows they're done because he's run out of energy but doesn't want to get subbed, it might not be the most exciting match, but that could also be exciting if the other person is, can smell blood or whatever. But then purely from a show perspective, if someone does go through a whole team, that's really exciting. So, that's newsworthy. But yeah, in theory, one person could do the entire 90 minutes. Yeah.
But then that 45-minute half is really cool because the clock starts for the 45 minutes, and then those matches, it doesn't matter how long the match is, whether the match is 30 seconds or the full 5 minutes, it keeps going continuously for that 45 minutes. So what happens is you could have, let's just say, 45 minutes of 5-minute matches, everyone by decision, or you could have 20 very quick matches in that 45 minutes. I think it's a really interesting format because it's, like I said earlier, just very unpredictable. You just don't know really what's going to happen. You have those mismatches in size, and you don't know. There's no strategy. You can't really predict who's coming out next. Everybody's just on the mat with very little time to prepare, and it's very different to a duel or a quintet. There's no limit to the number of matches. So in that total 90 minutes, the number of matches and even rematches within that same team event, it just keeps going and going and going. And when you consider that the each match will give a point towards the overall team score, it's really, really cool as it starts getting closer to the end of the tournament, because there was a moment when South America were down by about 3 points, but they had an opportunity to come back and to try and win, and they got very, very close. And it's, man, I gotta say, again, not blowing smoke up your ass, it is a very interesting, original, and really exciting team format. So this all kind of leads in now to the big final that you've got scheduled for November 1st. And this is the final between, so Asia and Oceania going to go through against
Europe.
Team Europe, who beat Team USA in the previous semi-final.
So
is that the final that you predicted?
I really didn't know what was going to happen at the last show because the teams changed a few times. It was a little bit tricky. Obviously, after CGI had kind of announced its move into the teams format, that made our lives a bit difficult. But I was very, very happy with how things ended up. I didn't know what was going to happen last weekend. I'm happy that Asia and Oceania went through. I would have also been happy if the other team went through, but there's some good characters on that team, and it's going to be a good final. So just now we're getting the contracts out, making sure everybody's locked in for November. Because you know what Jiu-Jitsu people are like. We when they sign the contract for the show, it says if you win, you'll be back on November 1st. But not everybody thinks that far ahead. So there's various things going on, but hopefully we can get pretty much the same teams back for November. And it's been basically a year-long story. So there's a lot of interest, which I'm happy about. We kind of put the tickets on sale already without really saying too much, and they're flying online. I'm getting messages about it. You're flying in, people are coming over for it. So it'll be really good.
Yeah, so that was my next question, is that will the teams remain the same? I imagine there might be some changes due to availability or if somebody gets injured or other challenges, but it should be more or less the same teams that will face off in the final.
Ideally, it will be the same teams. I do think Owen Jones is coming back because I don't know if you remember, but we were up in this mansion in Doncaster getting ready for the show, and Owen literally woke up one morning and his knee was like a football. And he just said, guys, I don't know what the fuck is going on, but I can't compete at the weekend. And we called Pavel Jaworski, and he flew over from Poland, I think, like 3 hours later or something. So, Pavel...
Well, that worked out.
Huh?
That worked out.
That worked out very well. Yeah, we knew how good Pavel was. Because that's what Polaris is good at, is recognizing what's going on in Europe and the UK. But he did replace Owen, and I think... Owen will be back for November, which, I like Owen a lot and he's very exciting. But by the same token, Pavel is amazing as well. So, but Owen was in the original team, so we have to give him the chance to compete. And I'm happy about that.
Yeah, no, it is. It's going to be an awesome event. I'm really excited for the final. Yes, newsflash, I'm gonna come over for that. But I have been to... I've lost count. Many Polaris events over the years. It's been 10 years now, so there's been quite a few Polaris events I've been
Yeah.
over for. But this is actually my first time coming over for a squads event. So coming over for the final.
You're in for a treat.
Definitely very excited. Yeah, I am. So 10 years of Polaris. It will be your 10-year anniversary, more or less, right?
I'm pretty sure that the anniversary has passed. I think the first event was
Okay.
was at the beginning of the year. It was like January in Cardiff, 2015.
2015. So it's been 10 years that you've run in Polaris then.
Yeah.
And I think this is a great time for us to talk a little bit about the behind the scenes of Polaris in general, because I feel like actually within the Jiu-Jitsu world as well, and this is definitely by design, but maybe a lot of people aren't even that fully aware of your involvement with Polaris. You keep it pretty low key. There's a team of guys who run the event. There were a team of founders, and you have a team of people who work on the day-to-day operations of the event. Like you said earlier, you're a director of Polaris, and your hands-on sort of day-to-day activities and actually at the event are very different now to what they were.
Yeah.
But 10 years of running an event, I mean, that in itself is quite an achievement, because in the jiu-jitsu landscape, events come and go. And some events pop up, they maybe have a handful of events, they maybe run for 1 to 2 years, and then all of a sudden, they're just not here anymore. And Polaris could maybe hold the title for being the longest running professional jiu-jitsu event, certainly of the last 10 years, but possibly one of the longest running events of all.
Pro Invitational, yeah, that's possible. Yeah.
So within that 10 years, I can imagine there's been some ups and downs, but give me a little bit of a sort of a backstory first of all. Why did you create Polaris? Like, where did the idea come from?
I'm trying to remember if at what point Meta Morris came into the picture, because that was definitely inspirational.
Yeah, I think the first show was in 2011, because I remember I was living in Brazil at the time, and I remember watching the stream. There was like a bunch of me and other jiu-jitsu practitioners. We all lived in a hostel in Rio, and we were all crowded around like a 13-inch laptop screen in the living room, trying to watch this sort of a very shaky stream with unreliable internet. But it was around about 2011.
Okay, so that I got to say that definitely put the seed in our minds. We just kept thinking that we should do some kind of event, and we started developing an idea for I guess like a sub-only sort of invitational. I think it was called the Finishers, and I started working on graphics for it, and then I've told the story a couple of times, but there was a fateful evening in Portugal at the Euros. It was mine and Ben's first Euros from Scramble, and we knew that Tatami would be there, and we'd spoken to Tatami on and off, Tatami being the other major sort of British jiu-jitsu brand, and we sat down with them for dinner for a what do you call it, Brazilian barbecue, and honestly drank probably more whiskey than I've ever drank in my life. I think it was 2 or 3 bottles of Johnny Walker between like 4 or 5 of us, and went out after that. There's other stories that are not appropriate for now.
Not appropriate for a family podcast.
No, yeah. But the kind of conclusion from there was let's do an event, let's do a show, and let's do it together, because then we can put our resources and connections together. And then, I guess we kind of sobered up a bit, but realized that what we'd spoken about was a cool idea. And then I think I remember meeting in Cardiff me and Ben went to Cardiff, met the Tatami guys again, had a coffee. We went to the St. David's Hall Theatre. St. David's Hall. Had a look around, and we started to think like, wow, we can actually do a show if we wanted. And it was basically a bottomless pit of money that we were kind of committing ourselves to in the beginning. But one thing that I'm really proud of is we always paid everybody that we said we were going to pay. There was never a question of, well, there's no money in the kitty, so you can't get paid. Like, we made sure that people were paid for their work every time, athletes and staff and everything like that. I know that other shows sometimes don't, and like, that's just wild to me. But anyway, it started like that. We yeah, it was all a bit of a blur. And then suddenly it's Friday night in Cardiff, and Andre Galvao is there because he came with his wife, I think, and Eduardo Tellez and Dean Lister and Keenan Cornelius, and like I nearly had a panic attack. I basically did have a panic attack. I had to leave the room because I was so freaked out by what we'd managed to kind of pull together that I just couldn't stand it, and I had to leave. And a guy called Matt McGovern at the time was working for us, and he like weighed half the guys in. I just couldn't be in the room. It was too weird. Yeah,
that's wild. Yeah, I'm not sure if you remember, but I was actually there that day.
Really?
We all met in Cardiff, and we did a walkthrough of the venue.
And I'd completely forgotten.
Yeah, we did a walkthrough of the venue together, and I remember we were discussing sort of the overall logistics because, like you said, it was your first time ever running an event.
Are you sure was that definitely number one?
Well, it was prior to number one because I was in the UK at the time. I was over for a visit, and we all met up in Cardiff, and we did a walkthrough of the St David's Hall, which was the venue for the first couple. And it was Tone from Fockeye Show Your Rolls, where he was there too. So we all did a walkthrough of the venue, and I remember we were talking about. Well, I was trying to explain the importance of like camera angles for running a live event and things like this. Yeah, this
as I
way
told
back.
you, it's all a blur for me, but yeah.
Yeah, but I also remember an early challenge that you had was obviously not just figuring out the logistics of running an event from zero. But one of the early challenges was you had to change the name of the event, remember?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's still technically Paragon behind the scenes, but we called it Paragon, and I did a logo with a P on it. And then Jeff Glover got a bit salty with us and sent a whole bunch of emails. I knew that we were in the clear legally because it's a different enough industry and a different country. But I didn't want to get on the bad side of Jeff because, we don't like to get on the bad side of anybody, really. So we were like, well, we've got a P logo. Now we need to think of something with a P in it. Yeah, and it had
suddenly
a star
going through the
top,
dictionary,
so,
looking for words with P. Yeah. So that's how the Polaris name came about. Which is Polaris is it's like the
brightest
North
star in the sky. That's what it is, I think.
There you go. So it actually all worked out. So you mentioned there about how you didn't want to get on the bad side of Jeff in those early days, and that resulted in the name change. But something else interesting about Polaris that I've always felt that for 10 years, you guys have done an incredible job of basically avoiding any drama or controversy. And if there's one thing that I can say that my overall feeling about the Polaris brand in general is that you have a very professional appearance, both outward facing and inward facing. Like you say, you treat all the athletes well, you treat the staff well, you make sure that everybody who's involved in the event is well taken care of. But then you've never tried to lean into any manufactured drama, controversy, anything along this. It's really just about putting the jiu-jitsu first, right?
Yeah. I mean, doing this podcast is probably the most any of us have stuck our neck out, from Polaris, because most of the guys are just happy to be creating the product itself, What was I going to say? Wait. You actually asked a question. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just about how you've managed to avoid the drama over the years.
Yeah, it's been intentional, but it's also been at times difficult because almost every other major promotion that's come and gone has had a figurehead, and it's a very powerful tool when it's working, but it leaves that person, I guess, very vulnerable to criticism. And when everything's going good, you get all the praise, and then when everything goes down the toilet, you get all the criticism. But it's also, like the story of Polaris is almost just kind of watching other people do things, wondering if we should also be doing that, then kind of having a discussion and going, well, no, we're just going to keep doing things the way that we think is correct. And then watching that person crash and burn, and then we go, yeah, we were right. Like I can't, I mean, Eddie Bravo's still going, to be fair to him, but
yes,
the competition is literally called the Eddie Bravo Invitational, so he's the front man. I mean, you had Kasai, which was it Rich Burns?
Yeah, Rich founded Kasai Grappling,
and also one of the Gracies, wasn't it?
Hollis Gracie was the matchmaker, and sort of he was the front facing man there. Rich Byrne was the founder and the guy with the financial resources to get the event going. A very passionate man about jiu-jitsu. He's a black belt under John Danaher. He's trained extensively with the Renzo Gracie team. He also trains nowadays at Unity Jiu-Jitsu, and he also has a gym in New York. And that guy, he is. Rich is he's actually been very helpful in the jiu-jitsu world. He's helped out a lot of people.
Yeah, I've heard he's very generous and
very
kind.
generous.
Yeah,
ran his event with again without any real sort of controversy or anything over the years.
That's true.
They closed shop. Their last event was at the very beginning of 2020, just pre-pandemic, and the COVID really put the brakes on their event. They lost a lot of momentum and they never came back. But it is just going back. Polaris seems to be a really strong example of that classic faceless business, right? Yeah. About how I think a lot of people would be it would be tough for them to actually point out who runs Polaris, because like you say, you don't have that front-facing figure. You don't have the Dana White of Polaris. You don't have a sort of a public-facing president. So I can imagine that, like you said, that is very positive in many ways, but has it held you back at some point? Has it made things more difficult in trying to reach out to people and to get them involved with the show?
Honestly, not really. It's it's very easy for us to reach out to athletes and things through social media. It's more like we watch these other shows and other people doing it, and then we have a brief moment of like, should we be doing that? Should we be like, and then we decide not to, and then it always feels like the right decision. I mean, it would be nice. Yeah, it might be nice in some ways if we have an announcement. Like social media responds to faces really well.
Yeah.
So if we have some kind of announcement, in a way, it would be nice if there was a kind of, I don't know what the correct role would be, but like a spokesperson, instantly recognizable, who could deliver like news or rule changes or announcements, stuff like that. But as far as the kind of owners of the company, there's not a great urge for us to be the focal point, no.
And of course, it's not like you're starting from zero, because as a brand owner and with all your connections within the industry, with the athletes that you already sponsor, and Tatami as well, one of the biggest brands in the world, they sponsor so many amazing athletes too. You already have those relationships with the athletes and their managers and other people within the business. So you already have that relationship and that trust. You're not starting from zero.
Yeah. Although one thing I will say is, me personally, Ben doesn't mind it so much, but I will hand off any kind of athlete as soon as possible to, somebody from Polaris officially, because it's just too difficult navigating the kind of a friendship angle and a sponsorship angle and a professional event angle. It gets kind of complicated, and then it also, one of the reasons why Polaris is still here 10 years later is because we're fairly careful with our budget. And let's say there's 16 people on the main card, and one of them who I'm friends with or who we sponsor says, hey mate, I really need my corner man to come, or I need to stay an extra few days, or I need to change at this place, and the cost kind of creeps up. And if you're friends, you might be inclined to be like, yeah, okay, we can do that. And then but you times that by 16 and suddenly your travel budget is 20,000 more than it was before you started speaking to them. So there has to be a handoff and a separation, which we couldn't do in the old days, and that was one of the main kind of stress points for me. But that might just be me. Like, I think the other guys are slightly less worried about that. Like, it's tough. It's tough, especially when they're actually at the event and competing, or if they lose or something. It's like, yeah, that's why I just want to sort of melt into the background in the show.
Smart. A question for you then. The first thing that I kind of want to point out is about how Polaris originally started almost as a showcase for bringing athletes that you sponsored and to give them a platform. And that was certainly a sort of an early part of the overall vision. Obviously, it's expanded so much over the years, and you've brought in so many different athletes that you didn't work with directly.
I want you to finish that question, but it was never designed to showcase our athletes. That wasn't it. We wanted to make the best show we could. That was it. Yeah.
And that obviously is very evident because you guys have done that. I mean, just look at some of the names that you have brought in over the years, not just the top guys from the world of Jiu-Jitsu, but also top guys from the world of MMA as well, and bringing those and putting them in on Polaris too. But what you mentioned there about the budgets and some of the challenges that come with running an event, I can imagine there are many challenges over the years that you've had, but a biggest challenge for any event is how do you create something sustainable? How do you keep going? Because like I said, you have many events, and usually what happens is they find a rich benefactor and they have X amount budget to begin with. Usually the people running those events don't have a ton of business experience. In the past, historically, they tend to have been very passionate about jiu-jitsu and they've had great ideas, but they've come in and they've spent a lot of money, and within, whether it's a couple of events, whether it's a few months, a few years, whatever, at some point the person with that bank account will suddenly say enough is enough. Yeah. But you've never had outside funding like that. Everything has been done internally from the very beginning. And I guess the biggest question is, how have you managed to keep going for 10 years when other events who have had greater resources than you have come and gone in that time? Sometimes many events have come and gone in that time.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy. And one of the most difficult things is just saying no to people. So, jiu-jitsu athletes, rightfully so, want to make as much money as they possibly can in the short span of their athletic peak. So we've had quite a lot of occasions where either on the first time reaching out to them, or let's say they competed for us once and it went well, and then we said, right, can we get you over again? The amount of money they've asked for has just been astronomical, and it's kind of, jumped by a factor of 10 from the first time they were on. And they, I'm not going to be naming any names, but they're very famous people, very famous in jiu-jitsu, very exciting, amazing athletes, and we just have to say no. And then they'll go and do another show, and it's kind of painful because we know that other show has probably paid them what they asked for, but it comes back to the same thing. We know that it's almost like a ticking time bomb at that point. If we know that we know how much those athletes are asking for, and we know that the other shows are paying it times 6 or 8 because they've got a whole bunch of those athletes on the show, it's just a time bomb at that point. That show is not going to survive because you're just not generating the revenue to cover the demands that the athletes are making. So that's one thing, is just being sensible and kind of boring in a way, because it'd be fun to splooge hundreds of thousands of dollars on an incredible show, but for what? It'd be exciting on the night, and then people would talk about it for a couple of days and then it'd be done, and you'd be like, now what? So we have to kind of constantly rein ourselves in. We've done it before. We did the squads event that was Brazil versus US with a headline of Damian Maia versus Benson Henderson was bananas, and we lost a sum of money there. But it was the only time I got a message. We got a message immediately after the show from the UFC brass, and they were like, that was fucking amazing. They said, what do you need from us to make that happen again? And we're like, money, loads more money. But it's just being sensible and just trying to grow the show in as many ways as we can. That try and sell as many tickets, make good agreements for the broadcasting rights, get sponsorships, sell merchandise. We got loads of plans for next year as well. The potential is there to do loads of things. We already partnered up with our friend Simon, who kind of produces this show, but he also runs amateur daytime events called Pro Sport Grappling. So from next year, that's now Polaris Pro Sport Grappling, and it's grassroots events We could do camps with the athletes. We could do seminar tours. So there's loads of potential to grow the show beyond just the show itself. Yeah, that's about it, I think.
Well, one thing I've noticed is exactly what you mentioned there about being sensible with your budgets and not falling into that trap of trying to compete with these flash-in-the-pan events that are coming in and offering large amounts of money for athletes to appear. And there's been periods as well in the last 10 years where events have come up and they've locked many guys into exclusive contracts and given them lots of money and then disappeared again, and those guys are suddenly available once more. Yeah. But you mentioned, of course, about sort of being sensible in spending. But one thing that you've done as well, which I think is, again, some people might perceive it as a boring business strategy, but it's been proved that it's one of the reasons why you've just kept going and going and going, is that you have appeared to resist the temptation to try and grow too much. And nearly all, I think that sort of 95, 98% of your events have all been held in mainland Great Britain. You did one event in Sardinia, but you've never had that sort of grand plan of world domination, maybe like some events have done, right?
Yeah, I mean, we do have that grand plan, but we're just being sensible about how we implement it. I mean, we would love to do a show overseas next year, yeah. And we're fairly far along planning it, but it's still up in the air, you know, depends how the first few events goes. It depends. I mean, ADCC announcing Poland kind of put a little bit of a spanner in the works, but yeah, you're right. You know, we're just going to be sensible about it. But I would love to do shows around Europe for sure.
Yeah, because Polaris has that position that you're not only the biggest, but you're pretty much the only regular running professional jiu-jitsu event in Europe, not just the UK, but in Europe as well, right? I look around and there are many small invitational events, small Superfight shows and stuff, but there are no large-scale professional events that are flying in international competitors anywhere else in Europe at the moment, right?
There's not many in the world, really. No.
True.
I also feel sometimes that the kind of UK audience is getting a little bit complacent because we're here all the time, and the broadcast is good. So sometimes people just stay at home or whatever, watch it on TV. But whenever we speak to people in Europe, I can feel, or even like somewhere like Scotland or Ireland. I'd love to go to Ireland, but I can feel the hunger for the show to go there. And I feel like if we announce the show in Poland or in Ireland or Scotland or somewhere like that, people would go crazy for it and they'd buy a lot of tickets.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think maybe sometimes after such a long period that people don't realize what a good thing they have, right?
Yeah, it feels like we're in Wales every 5 minutes. Come on.
Hey, nothing wrong with that.
No.
But 10 years of running an event, there've probably been some really big lessons learned in that time as well. You know, starting from zero, having to figure out a lot of stuff as you go. You must have learned some major lessons about running an event. Is there anything that immediately that you would point to that we haven't already discussed, that if somebody has an idea to potentially start an event and they have some grand plan to run an event, what would be the sort of the biggest lessons learned that you would want to communicate to them?
Damn, I don't know. That it's because it's like a constant learning process. I don't really know if I could boil it down. I mean, we definitely overcame a few hurdles. One of the first ones that we realized before the first show was that we thought we were just streaming an event, but it is a TV broadcast. So even though it's going out on the internet, it's a TV show. So you need to be prepared to present it like a TV show with the amount of cameras and staff and everything like that. I mean, one thing is the kind of weird mentality switch that athletes have. So if it's an amateur event or if it's IBJJF or it's like ADCC trials, the show does not give a crap about you. They say you need to be on this mat at this time. and then the athlete will do everything to get themselves there. They'll book their flights, they'll book their hotels, they'll figure out how to get from their hotel to the venue, they'll get a cab or they'll get a train or whatever. As soon as you invite someone for a Superfight show, they become like a child again. And they're like, right, do everything for me. And if you don't, it becomes like an issue, you know. I mean, there was one funny but also not so funny story. Like, as we started to professionalize more and more, because we were like that in the beginning, it'd be like, right, we've got a hotel for you and the venue is there. And then we just assumed that they would be there on time, you know. And I think one day in Wales, it was pissing down with rain. And the athletes were like, well, how do we get to the venue? And we were like, because, you know, we were expecting them to walk. And then we started to think about, oh, now we need to arrange transportation to get them to the venue. And then I remember when we were in London, one of our first London shows, I think Aoki Shinya was there. He was cornering Cal Uno. I picked him up from the airport. That was funny. And we were like, right, we've sorted everything. You know, we've got transport from the hotel to the venue. No, it wasn't transport. I think it was our staff were going to guide them, because you could get like the train, or you could even get you know, around the O2, there's those, what do you call them? Cable cars.
Oh, okay.
And we took some of them on the cable cars, but we arranged everything. We held their hand all the way to the venue, and then forgot to do it when it finished. So the show finished and everyone was just standing around, like we're all high-fiving each other and drinking beers, and all the athletes are like,
now what?
like, what do we do now? And we were like, oh yeah, you got to get back to the hotel. And I think I went outside and flagged a taxi for Shinya and Uno, and you know, that was like another lesson. Like, right, now we need to arrange transport to the venue and back to the venue. You know, I remember AJ Agazarm getting off the plane in London and calling us and going, "Hey man, where's Cardiff?" You know, it's like, well, oh yeah, it's about
like 3 hours away. Yeah.
So, just stuff like that we learned as we went along. Yeah, that's
a lot of lessons learned, I'm sure. Probably hard to distill it all down into a succinct answer like that. So sorry for putting you on the spot. But
no, okay.
Let's change gears a little bit. 10 years, ton of events, and you've already mentioned more than once about how terrible your memory is. But again, got a big question for you. So, moments that you are most proud of when you look back. But then also, maybe you can counter that with some moments that you look back on with horror and you think, oh my God, why did we do this, or why did we let that happen? What are you most proud of, first of all, when you look back at Polaris over the years?
There's a few, I guess. I did write about this once, but chances are nobody actually read it. We did a show in Wales. It might have been Polaris 18, I think, with... it was Ash Williams was headlining against... pretty sure it was Paolo Miao. Big match in the gi. And just looking at that show and kind of seeing Welsh athletes basically from the first match on the prelim, dotted through the prelims, then through the main card, and then Ash headlining, and all of them wearing tatami, you know. I thought, like, we actually created a thing, like an ecosystem. So if you're good at grappling and you live in the UK, you have a goal, which is to headline Polaris, you know. And you could start from match one of the prelims when the arena is half empty and everyone's still getting drinks. And then a few years later, you can be fighting Paolo Miao in the gi, you know. That made us feel quite proud, I think. It was like just seeing a whole career be mapped out for someone, you know, from the sponsor to the event. That was a nice moment.
I gotta say, just jumping in quickly, man, I love that. I really do, because that is something that a lot of people struggle with, is when they're starting out on their jiu-jitsu journey, if they have any designs whatsoever to become a competitor, and they have this grand goal of, you know, becoming a professional within the sport as well, that there isn't a very clearly mapped out career path for these guys. And what they're really told is, well, just get good at jiu-jitsu. And that's not enough. You know, you can be really good at jiu-jitsu, but it doesn't prepare you for all that other stuff about how to actually get onto a pro show and how to put yourself in a position to be competing underneath the lights and with all the cameras. And and going into like a main event kind of status. You've created a clear path for these guys to come in and to follow. And it can start off, of course, with getting your feet wet in local tournaments and working your way up through the ranks. And you pick off those results. You're going to make a name for yourself. You're suddenly going to have a reputation, and the invitations may then come. But you've shown that it's possible for these locals to actually have a clear vision that I can be a purple belt, blue belt, purple belt, competing on the prelims and the undercard. And one day, if I keep working and I keep knocking off these names, I can advance up through the ranks, and one day I can be in a main card position. Yeah. Personally, I think that's really cool, and specifically for using that region as an example as well. This is the case for all regions, of course. You can find good jiu-jitsu anywhere in the world. You can find very talented competitors anywhere in the world. And one of the biggest questions that I hear time and time again is a lot of these guys, they just don't know how they can put themselves out there. They just don't know what the options are available to them, because especially if you haven't got the resources to travel and to compete in international level events, they're often stuck in that little bubble, and they're not sure about, well, how do I break through into the sort of the international scene, and how do I go pro? Wales in particular, it's not like it's particularly better than maybe any other region, but obviously I'm from that area and I have a sort of a deep connection to the area. And I just think back to when I started jiu-jitsu. There was no jiu-jitsu in Wales when I was coming through. And there were other martial arts, and I didn't start jiu-jitsu in Wales. I started in Manchester, and my journey took me sort of all around the UK, and then obviously to Brazil. And I only went and trained jiu-jitsu in Wales. I was already a brown belt. I came back from living in Brazil for a few years, and I came to visit my family, and I found the local clubs. I went to train with Greg Creel over there in Abertillery, and I met the Pedro Bessa guys. I went down to Newport to train with Wayne Aradevich and his guys. And I went down to Cardiff to train with they used to run this really cool session where all the guys in the South Wales area would come down to Cardiff, the guys from Swansea, the guys from the Valleys, the guys from everywhere would come down. They'd have this big session with Pedro and all his association and other guys that would all come to train together. And I suddenly witnessed firsthand, I was like, wow, the level of jiu-jitsu is actually really, really good here. And this was pre-Polaris. So, we hadn't really seen these guys competing on any stage at that point. And I was impressed. And then in the years that followed, very quickly it showed that there's actually a lot of very, very talented athletes from specifically that region. And I've said this before to other people, and I truly believe that every country has like a hotspot of grappling talent. If you look at Brazil, one of the famous hotspots is Manaus, right? You've got all these killers from Manaus. There's something in the water, that city in the jungle, in the Amazon. There's just so many amazing world champions have all come from Manaus. All the way back, you look at guys like Fredson Paixão, Ronaldo Jacare, all throughout the years, all the way to Mika Galvão and Fabricio Andre. All these guys are coming through from Manaus. In America, it's New Jersey. For some reason, the majority of the high-level grapplers who are winning the big titles, Nicky Rod, Gordon Ryan, all these guys, they're all New York, New Jersey, which is quite curious. But then, in the UK, Wales, and specifically South Wales, seems to be a real hotspot for talent. Of course, Fionn Davis, Ash Williams, Ross Nichols, and so many others. They were the first guys to break through and to get onto ADCC. And Fionn is the greatest example, of course, with her ADCC and her world titles and so on. But I kind of joke a little bit that South Wales, it's the Dagestan of the UK, because Dagestan is this tiny, tiny, tiny region in Russia. And yet all the best black belts and actually all the best Olympic wrestlers as well, they all come from Dagestan. And Wales and Dagestan are kind of the same thing. It's this tiny mountainous region where there really isn't anything else to do except scrap. And back in the day, there used to be a very it was quite an aggressive culture to grow up in, and there was a lot of confrontation. There was a lot of sort of like very almost tribal sort of confrontations. It was quite literally sort of village against village, town against town, and maybe that's something specific about the geography. When I went back and I was training with Greg and those guys in Abertillery, which is in the eastern part of the South Wales Valleys region, Greg said something really interesting to me. He's like, people don't scrap on the streets anymore. It used to be that people would go out on, Friday, Saturday night, they would get absolutely hammered and then they would have a scrap. And he said, guys just aren't doing that anymore. They're training instead. And all these guys, a lot of them are in his gym and other people's gyms, and they've all sort of directed that energy into training jiu-jitsu. And it used to be in South Wales, if you saw somebody with a thick neck and a pair of cauliflower ears, they were 100% a rugby player.
Yeah.
And now it's 50-50, probably actually 80-20, that they probably do jiu-jitsu rather than play rugby like they used to. So sorry to sidetrack you there with my
just to add to that, I think
stories of my homeland.
Yeah. Owen Jones is Welsh, isn't he? Pretty sure.
I asked Owen about that. His dad is from Cardiff.
There you go.
But I asked him how he identifies, and he said, I got to rep the ends. He's London born and bred. He considers himself an
he sounds like he's from London. So.
Absolutely does, Owen Jones. Yeah, when you hear him speak, but Owen Jones is a very Welsh name. So
yeah.
Well, then that's a kind of some high points and some moments that we're proud of. I got one more
thing that I wanted to mention about things that we're proud of. I think we've done a good job with the women's events that we've done so far. We did a women's Grand Prix with the same prize money as the men's, and women's squads was amazing. So I feel like we're kind of doing our part to continue to grow that side of the sport. Pretty proud of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's always been a big focus for Polaris, right? I mean, ever since day one, it was almost 50-50 the amount of female athletes you had on the main card compared to the men.
Yeah, we can't claim that statistic, unfortunately, but we do our best.
So then, moments that you're most proud of, anything that you look back on in the last 10 years and you just hold your head in your hands and you're like, oh my God, why did we do this? Or was there something that you look back on in horror and it was a teachable moment, let's say? A
teachable moment? Not. There hasn't been any major disasters because it's almost like you just can't allow them to happen. So you kind of have to fix that problem immediately or before it's even become a big problem. I mean, regrets. I mean, there's been athletes that we've invited and then they've kind of given, everything's agreed and arranged, and then they've started making noises that put a little doubt in the back of our minds about how serious they are. But we've ignored it, and then, they've ended up pulling out of the event, very close to the event, and we're all just like, I knew that was going to happen. We've had a few like that. We learned from that. So now if there's ever any kind of doubt, it's almost like we'll regain control of the situation and just say, okay, this match is off now, rather than being in the dark or being uncertain for a while. I've told this story before as well, but one of my worst moments that I had to leave the room was Gary Tonon before fighting, but basically he was fighting Imanari and he had to cut a lot of weight. I don't know if you've heard this story. And we were doing the weigh-ins and Imanari was undersized. So he was very insistent that Gary make the weight, and Gary was cutting a lot of weight. He stood on the scales, was still way over. He was getting pissed off. We were kind of uncomfortable. He was pissed off with himself, I think, in the general situation, not with us. I think he might have regretted in that moment agreeing to the weight. And so we were kind of saying, maybe we can come to some kind of agreement, because we don't want somebody to frigging keel over trying to make weight.
But you also don't want to lose the match.
Yeah. Imanari's sticking his head in going, he has to make weight, And we were like, okay. And then Gary put a bin bag on and just started sprinting around outside the hotel in Cardiff or something. And then while he was doing that, one of our staff friggin' picked up the scales and dropped them, and something happened to them. And then when we stood on the scales, it said I was like 12 kilos or something. And it was like, oh my God, we've broken the only scales we have. And Gary Tono's outside, killing himself to make weight. And Gary came in looking like death and started heading towards the scales. And I was just like, I have to leave. And I went. And then I just heard everyone like cheering, and then that was it. So I guess he weighed in, but I'm pretty sure the scales righted themselves. But yeah, that was scary. And then my only other regret is partying too hard with Craig Jones after his last Polaris appearance. I had a 5-day hangover. I probably should have admitted myself to hospital. It was that bad.
Oh my word! Yeah, that was a brave move, trying to hang with that guy.
And Tommy Langeker and Braulio and it was, and all the people from Polaris. It was fun.
Fantastic. So you teased a little bit about what we can expect from next year, but is there sort of a grand vision? Is there a 1 year, 5 year, 10-year plan for Polaris? Do you have? I'm sure you have. Obviously, the short to medium term goals lined up. But is it just a case of let's just see how far this thing can keep going?
Well, there's kind of one big announcement that we can't really make until later on, which we're very excited about. We will be doing more events starting next year. So the plan is 6 next year, and then 8 the year after that. As I mentioned before, we're adding the daytime, amateur pay-to-play side of it as well. That should be going on fairly regularly. We've got the first one is happening in London in February. You can find it on Smooth Comp. It's selling really well because, Pro Sport Grappling was already doing well. And now that we've added our name to it, it's kind of had a good effect. There's also
just to jump in, this isn't just a purely branding exercise. This is actually affiliating these events with Polaris, and it's offering an opportunity for guys to come through this tournament and act as a feeder system, right?
It's really we want to create the whole ecosystem. That people can get familiar with the rules, perform really well. But I don't want people to think it's only a route to Polaris, because it isn't. And 90% of what happens on the day is you'll be doing it for the same reasons you go and do any other jiu-jitsu competition. You want to challenge yourself, you want to get a medal, you want to go out with your team. It's a regular but very well run and Polaris branded jiu-jitsu competition. But alongside that, it has the association with the show. We're going to be at a lot of them, seeing who's doing well. We are running a contenders on the first one, so the 70 kilo contenders will actually face Ethan Krellenstein. So there's a few people already signed up from Poland, and people are taking it super seriously. And then I think I've got that right. And then the 77 kilo contenders will get a spot in a Grand Prix later in the year. So that's going on. The grand plan is to, in 3 to 5 years' time, to be the number one show, basically. And if somebody were to look out across the landscape of professional jiu-jitsu, then we'd be right up there. Yeah.
That's awesome. So what do you hope for in the future for Polaris?
Apart from a billionaire sugar daddy. I don't know. I guess just to keep growing and just do better and better shows. It would be nice to have the feeling of no constraints and just invite whoever we wanted onto every show. But that's the realities of running a business. I don't think that will ever go away. And that might be the end of us if we did that. So, yeah, just to keep growing, really.
So that's a pretty good wrap-up for everything that's happened, or a brief wrap-up for everything that's happened in Polaris in the last 10 years. And I'm sure we could do many more episodes where we do look back at the history of Polaris, because there's been some amazing things that have happened. But just to let everybody know that there is one more event taking place this year. We talked about it already. November 1st is the squads finals. You're probably really excited for that, right?
Yeah, I can't wait. And it's in my hometown too, so. Yeah.
Nice. Get to sleep in your own bed.
Exactly, yeah.
Awesome. So we've got Asia, Oceania going up against Team Europe in the squads finals, and any other matches that maybe you could reveal?
Actually, so we have Sulame versus Helena Krevar, because in the women's squads, I don't know if you remember, but in the last match, I'm sure you remember. In the last match, it was one of the shorter matches, and Suleiman just came out on fire and jumped over Helena's guard at the exact right time and took mount and basically stayed in mount, if I recall, for a very long time, which won her the decision. So she was over the moon. Helena was less pleased. And let's say that she was very keen to kind of get that one back. So I'm really excited to see that, because Helena's going to be super motivated to, I guess, show everybody that that wasn't a realistic kind of outcome. And then I think Suleiman is really excited to show people actually it was, and this is her chance to prove it to everybody. So we do have another super fight, which I can't announce, I don't think, or I could say it and you could bleep it out. What do you think?
Well, just tease us. What can people
It's another
expect?
women's super fight.
Oh, very cool, very cool.
Yeah, in fact, this will be the first squads with 2 super fights, and they'll both be women's matches, and it's a good one.
Nice. So the Helena Suleiman will be a rematch under Superfight rules, whereas before they fought just in the final match of the squads.
Yeah, so I think they only did about 3 minutes or something, and this will be the full 3-5 minute title fight. So title match.
That's great. That's great. Awesome. Well, people should definitely keep an eye out for further announcements then, and announcements in general for next year. Right, lots of things happening, always developing, always things going on behind the scenes. So
yes. So I'll see you in November.
Yeah, you will. I'm really excited for it. I actually can't wait to come over for that. Me and my wife are going to come over. She's actually now training jiu-jitsu this year. She suddenly decided that she wants to get on the mats after all these years of, and she's training. She's in love with it. So she's really excited to come and watch the event. And yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I think my last time I came over for a Polaris event was the 77 kilogram GP that you ran in Newport. The one that PJ Barch won. That was a really fun event. That was the last one I came over for. It was about 1.5 years ago, I think. So, long overdue to come back and to watch a Polaris event in person rather than just downloading it like I usually do. So, can't wait.
It will be a good one. Atmosphere will be good.
Yeah.